should be streaming.
All right, we'll call a committee portion of the meeting to order. To order, yes. Thank you, Matt. We'll start with the strategic plan update, staffing.
Yeah, and I just have a brief update for you in that regard. We do know that we're down in terms of student numbers, which is not atypical as far as Wisconsin generally is concerned. Most districts are on the decline. As a result, there's been a couple of retirements, recent, well, more than a couple, a few technically, 3 or so retirements, and as a result, we've worked through plans such that those positions in all likelihood will not be filled, so we know that with a reasonable degree of comfort, we'll be down 2 FTEs, 2 positions at the elementary, and then for sure 1 position at the middle school, and doing some shifting in that regard, transitioning to a 3-section 5th grade for next year rather than 4. And that puts the 5th grade numbers at 27 per classroom, which is on the higher end of where we'd want it to be. However, it does position us appropriately for what the future numbers would portend, which is significantly fewer than that. So it's 81 next year, split by 3 is 27 per class. And after that, there's numbers that dip into the 70s, 60s, and even 50s. And so clearly 4 sections in 5th grade is not really a sustainable approach in the foreseeable future. And so that move was made as a result of Brian Eckern's retirement, which you guys acted on last month. And so we're going to do a bit of shifting and make that modification there, which means that we should see a net 3 FTE reduction, and there's a potential for a 4th, but that's contingent upon a leave and so forth, and as well as pre-K numbers, which may warrant bringing a staff member back one way or the other regardless. And so right now I would say we'll be down 3 FTE, which is going to be, it's not positive that we're losing kids and not replacing staff, but it is positive in terms of budget, right? It's not positive from a human perspective, but it's positive in terms of budget. As you know, we had a fairly slight deficit going into this year. There's no human being currently walking the earth that can tell us what the next biennial state budget will hold, but I'm anticipating it will not be you know, a wealth of dollars coming our direction. I'm sure if there's any kind of increase to public ed, it'll be frugal and what the state can reasonably feel that they can reasonably manage. And I think it's going to assist us in making ends meet. And my hope is that we can do that in the long term. So I would argue that the board, as well as the staff, will be prepped to know that over time here, over the next handful of years, that will be likely the goal, that each time there is a retirement, there'll be a lot of critical reflection on whether or not this is a position that we have to fill based on numbers. Lastly, what I'll mention too, just to put people's minds at ease to a degree, we're not talking about 30-kid classroom sizes at the elementary or frankly anywhere else. With those numbers that I'm sharing, we're still being very close, if not below, the old SAGE numbers or the AGR numbers, which would be 18 in elementary, lower elementary, under 18 or below. So we're going to maintain those numbers. And in fact, there's going to be some fairly small classes that work their way through there too, just because of statistics. You know, so you might have some 15-kid classes because it doesn't warrant dropping to 3, but it does if you still have 4, then you have some smaller class sizes. So generally, I don't think you're going to see parents be like, my God, what happened to my kids' classes here? We're not in that circumstance. And so I think through attrition, we'll be able to, you know, quote unquote, right size us over time. So that's what I know now as it stands. I think that's probably how we'll carry into next year. The only moving part would be that 4K staffing scenario, which Rita and I will monitor, and if it's a posting that we need to do, we'll do a posting.
Is there, statistically or historically, the 4K numbers, because I think you had 44 or something in that PowerPoint or whatever, that sheet we're going to see later, but is that average?
So at 4K is really
Right.
variable. It has been much, so generally haven't.
Rita, can you use the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Pardon me. With 4K classes, there's a lot of variability. However, we have always had enough for 3 sections, which means on average 16 times 3, which I'm not going to show off and do for you right now. And then with, this year, it's a little smaller, but next year, we already, whatever numbers I showed you last time, they've already shot up huge. So there does seem to be, we had after the COVID baby, what would you call that? The opposite of a boom? Whatever. There does seem to already be some bounce back. So the 4K numbers we already have more than we've ever had at this point. So that's why we're not sure. If we generally people register for 4K in the summertime. We've never had this many at this point in March. So if we continue to get the enrollments coming in, it'll be a bigger class than it's ever been before.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. How do we forecast, again, based on our numbers that we see coming in?
So at the elementary school, we look at the year before, and then if it's a 4K or a K class, you usually try and think plus or minus 8 that will come in the summer or come in at the beginning of the year. And then we look at the suggested cap with AGR. It's no longer mandatory that you stick to the cap of 18 students in third, second, first, kinder, and 4K, or actually not 4K, pardon me. It's no longer mandatory, but like Craig said, we think it's a value we hold dear, and we really do think it's the most important AGR strategy, so we're always trying to maintain that. So we look at how many kids are in the grade below, and then plus or minus 8 in the lower grades. We stay pretty stable first through fourth grade.
Tashina, you mentioned like how do we identify how many 4K kids we think we should be getting?
Yeah, just because
Yeah.
the world in general, people are either choosing not to have children or half of what they, if they would have had 3 or 4, they're having 1 or 2.
I can tell you how we forecast for that. We look at
Yeah.
Little Saints and we get those numbers. And then we do have county data that we can look at. We used to send letters to everyone in the county who had or in our school district, we can use county data, and send a letter to all of them and say it's time to register for 4K, but we found because there's so much more mobility in the last 10 years than there has been in the past, that was completely ineffective. So now we look at the Little Saints numbers, and then we try to get people to register as early as possible. And so now we're at a point, like Craig said, where if we get 10 more kids, we'll probably need 3 teachers. And at that point, we just stay on watch. Unfortunately, the variability is so high, it's really hard to get an accurate prediction.
Yep. So what districts do generally is have child development days, so that is an opportunity that we can capture some 3- and 4-year-olds that will be coming into the system. There's, advertising, as it were, to say, hey, it's time to register your kid for 4K. There's districts that review birth announcements and keep track of those things. It's frankly quite archaic because it's also contingent upon parents making the choice to come in and register their child for 4K. There's no compulsory attendance for 4K. So it's I think now in Wisconsin in particular, because we've had 4K for so long, that I think most parents know it's kind of common knowledge now, like kindergarten was in the old days, that, okay, when my kid's, about to turn 4 or is 4, I'm gonna get them registered for some programming. And frankly, the significant lack of childcare opportunities for people is a motivating factor. Not that 4K and childcare are necessarily equivalent, but it's an opportunity for parents to have their kids spoken for during work hours, and I think that's a significant motivating factor for parents too. So it's ironic that in this day and age you would think that there'd be some kind of a more, cohesive, but frankly in every district I've been, that's been the approach. And that's why you see 4K numbers in particular. In a lot of districts too, kindergarten numbers fluctuate quite a bit because there's some parents that choose not to register until kindergarten. And so it's usually just kind of a shot in the dark it's an educated guess from the factors that Rhea mentioned, or Rhea, that's my daughter, my God, that Rita mentioned. Because she's home on spring break, by the way, maybe that's why I'm thinking about her. But yeah, so it's not a perfect process whatsoever, but there is some consistency. And with 4K in particular, you can roll into a year in a district our size where it's 40 kids and that's all you got. You can roll into a year and all of a sudden it's near 100 or high 80s. And so it's also not atypical to be, unfortunately, looking to hire for early childhood and 4K teachers in like August, and sometimes even September. That's not an awesome spot to be in, but that's kind of what happens. Thank you.
I have one other question. Are we capturing 100% of the Little Saints? Do they come to?
Nowhere near that. A little disappointed because that was one of the goals, you remember, was to capture open enrollments. That has not been the case at all so far. So I'm disappointed by that. And I talked over some things with Jess about how to make that happen. And a little later, we'll talk about a change we're making for schools that might have an impact on that in a positive way. But right now, no, kids are going there until we have, I think, however many, let's say we have 20 kids in the 3-year-old room now. I don't remember how many we have. We have about 12 of them going to Osceola. So it has not panned out. Mm-mm.
Is it okay to piggyback off of something? So, because that was kind of a question I had too, was with Little Saints, if you have kids that might be committed to other districts and such, but then there are kids that couldn't get into Little Saints.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I appreciate you bringing it up. I'm going to write it down.
And the only reason I ask is because I'm of the age where I have a lot of friends who they could not get into Little Saints because of the waiting.
So true.
Yeah, and nobody's fault. It's just the waiting list and the accessibility and not enough spots. But then they go elsewhere, but they will come back to St. Croix, or maybe they won't. I don't know, but.
I think they mostly do, but I still think the question is a really good food for thought. Thank you.
Well, childcare, though, if we're utilizing Fund $80, cannot be St. Croix Falls School District only.
Can we give a
feeder.
preference even?
That I'm not 100% clear on, and when you have a waiting list like you do as well, I don't, that's going to be an interesting question to get answered.
Yeah, we can explore it.
But we can certainly ask the question. I'm inclined to think the answer would be no, from an
Well,
auditor's
I'm
perspective.
inclined to think so
but-
too, because and here's why I say that, because when we were getting this all going, I know we bounced all those questions around to see what we could do and had legal advice. So my guess is the answer is going to be no, but I still think it bears checking into.
Yep.
Anything else? All right, we'll keep Rita on the hot mic with the AGR
Great.
update.
So can you show that document, Lorraine? I hope you all had a chance to look it over, because I was not anticipating having to do another AGR update this quickly. We just did one. But because it's the 5-year contract renewal, things are a little bit different. So I will do the same things as I've always done. I'll continue to do 2 AGR updates a year, with the last one after end of year testing. But if you look at what's different on this one, I noted on page 7, you have a signature for the board president, Brent, but it's just, I click it and say this counts as your signature, and I didn't want to do that until I shared all this information with the board, just so you're sure about what you're signing. I promise I have it underhand, and I'm doing what needs to be done with AGR. I just didn't want you to not know what you were fake signing, I guess. I don't, because it's just an electronic signature. So if you have questions before I sign that, please let me know.
Does anybody else have any questions at this point after looking through it?
See that? See what I just write your name and then I click. So I felt a little uncomfortable with that without showing you everything.
I read through it. I didn't have any additional questions. Anybody else?
No? Thank you for reading through it. I really appreciate it.
Right, Rita?
this is the last thing, and then if
Most
you.
exciting.
It is, it's very exciting. And then if you don't mind, I'm gonna go back to my school immediately after because we're having parent-teacher conferences. Lori, can you show that fancy little flyer I made? Thank you so much. So, you probably already looked at this too, but we have talked about it in the past, moving kindergarten to the SCF location and 4K to the Dresser location, and this is the year to make that happen. For myriad reasons, I listed most of them. If you have questions or concerns, I would be happy to try and answer anything you want to talk about. And then I just want to point out what's really nice about this is now we'll have the 4K right next to Little Saints. So now we can have some collaboration between Little Saints and the 4K. That, if we can do some dual programming, maybe we can capture some of those open enrollments. So we can do some parent events where it's both Dresser 4K and Little Saints. And I'm hoping that'll beef up that open enrollment.
Brilliant. I love it.
Thank you. Any questions on any of this?
Not.
Do we, I can't remember, do we, okay, that's not on this. It's kind of related a little bit to the daycare.
Of course.
Okay. Are we in the black at the daycare?
So that's a hard question to answer because of the levies that we use. So yes, we're in the black. However, that does take levy money to stay in the black, but we monitor it closely. Unfortunately, after, we did get a great deal of federal support for childcare, which is much needed everywhere in the nation. During COVID times, that has completely dried up, and we have no hope of seeing it again at this point, unless something were to radically change. So we will continue to need the levy, but we're not losing, with the levy, we're not losing money. So it's still a viable service that we offer to the community. Does that answer your question?
Yep. I think the big rub is evident based on all of the child care centers that have not been able to sustain themselves, because there is definitely a correlation between what people can afford to pay and what you pay your people, and whether or not they're going to bother to send their kid to childcare or just have one of the two parents not work. Or if it's a single parent household, they decide maybe they have to go on assistance or something and spend time with their kids. So the child cares that are starting to take shape, we have one relatively local too, which clearly is going to be underwritten by the company that's originating it. And it'll be interesting to see if it is. I don't believe it will ever be a money maker. I don't think that there's a scenario in which childcare in the United States is making people money. It's just not sustainable. Now, small, maybe you got 5 or 6 kids in your home or you do your thing, that's a whole different ball of wax. But if you're talking about, a facility and all of these other pieces that you add, it's not functional because people can't afford to pay $1,000 a week,
And it's not really viable even in small in-home daycares anymore. That's why there's such a large waiting list. There's just it's not a financially viable career or business anyway. And then we do treat our staff really well. So it's still not the best pay in the world, but we do the best we can to pay our employees well and treat them well. And that's why we have almost no turnover, which is a miracle at a daycare.
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you, Rita. You may go back to your building, and we will discuss the Northern School District Trust.
So from my understanding, this is as a result of our involvement with dental insurance. This is the entity that provides dental insurance or the underwriting for said insurance. And we can nominate a delegate to go to their annual meeting.
Which I think, Matt, you have done before, haven't you? Mm-hmm. Go to the meeting. Did you go?
I did,
Oh.
yep. And they were surprised to see me because there hadn't been anyone there in 20 years or something. So apparently it's not necessary.
It's necessary that we have somebody be the representative, but it is.
Oh, yeah,
not
whether you go
necessary
or
that you
not?
go.
Oh, whether you go or not, okay. Well, since I have so much experience, I. It'll be the, or no, I'll.
You accept
I'll-
a
sure,
nomination for
sure,
the position?
Sure.
All right,
All right, we have a willing.
we have a willing participant to put his name on a piece of paper.
Stead today,
Be the VP, huh?
when we have our meeting, we can Stead.
Do you need it signed right away? Oh, okay, not by the end of the month. Okay. Can we do that if it wasn't posted, or is it?
Well, action on the topic was posted, so I think you're well within your authority to nominate someone else to sign in
Okay.
his stead, absolutely, yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. Moving on, the discussion,
Oh, are we gonna do the nomination then, Larray, in the regular meeting? Oh, it's just like there doesn't need to be action to make that happen. Oh, I got you. My apologies.
It's done deal.
Very well. Sorry, Brent.
it's all right. We're looking at the addition of a part-time, is it a part-time and slash substitute?
Correct. So the request that came from Brian Warner and the facilities, Buildings and Grounds Department was twofold. One, to add a part-time position that would, the lion's share of their time, this would be an afternoon / early evening position, say 3 to 7 or 4 to 8, something like that. And the lion's share of their time would be devoted to the Performing Arts Center, the Fine Arts Center, this room, and so forth, as well as some other miscellaneous things that through the course of the school year don't necessarily get accomplished as often as we would like, which are fairly mundane, like cleaning windows and, emptying some trash cans and so forth that are sometimes play second fiddle as a result of the other stuff that's going on. In talking with Brian, that request comes as a result of a staffing change hadn't taken place as a result of the addition of this facility, which I think is a fairly significant undertaking if we want it to be maintained to the degree it needs to be. There are going to also be times where, clearly this doesn't need to be cleaned on a daily basis, this and the Fine Arts Center, but there's going to be things that are done weekly here, more than one time a week, and then also there's other things that this individual can do. But primarily, it would be to serve also then as a sub for custodians that happen to be absent, and that would be covering their shift. So if they would cover a shift for someone that was like a day shift, then they wouldn't do their afternoon, evening. They would cover that. There might be a few miscellaneous things that they're still required to get in, but they would have guaranteed 4 hours a day and relatively frequent subbing when any custodial position is out, whether it be first shift or second shift, so that we can ensure that those are covered. Much like with teachers and aides and so forth, subs for custodians are not super easy to find, and what Brian taps into is largely a retired workforce who spends some time outside of the snow, for example, in Wisconsin, and which is, of course, more power to them, but not really sustainable to get a sub in here on December 12th when the subs that you have are in Arizona and Florida or wherever that may be. So that's the thought process. I personally do see a need for the position and can see the halftime position and can see the need for a floater sort of sub that is going to be your first call to cover for custodians. Because typically what happens too is if we can't find somebody, then it just sits. We don't cover that and we just do the minimum, and we know that, that's not really sustainable long-term, so.
Any idea what the ballpark range price?
You know, I was gonna put together some numbers for you. The problem, though, is that it's all gonna be dictated by how frequently this individual would sub. Because conceivably, if you're 4 hours a day, but you sub 3 times that week, you're gonna be, you know, in 8-hour positions or 7.5, you're gonna be making or getting substantially more hours than just 20 hours a week. So it's really tough to say. I mean, clearly, it's going to be a new expenditure on the budget, but not significantly sizable. It's not like, you know, hiring a full-time teacher and so forth, but, yeah, I don't. So the short answer to that question, Brent, is I didn't run the numbers because frankly, it's gonna be, you know, wildly out of there between, I don't know, as low as 20-some thousand, 25,000 to as high as 50-some thousand, arguably.
And the staff that are being substituted for are full-time, have sick time,
Yes,
all that PTO and all that stuff too.
correct.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the CISA contract.
The CISA contract is there for your consideration. This happens on an annual basis. In a general sense, there's 0 changes that we're recommending between this current year and next school year, which basically means if you look at that contract, we're just gonna check the boxes to renew the services that we already had, and we're not gonna add any new services. And generally speaking, it's roughly a 4% increase year over year. That's not across the board, so, but that's generally what the impact is, because some areas were held flat and other areas were increased more than 4%, but the average across the board would be a 4% increase.
Any questions on the CISA contract? Not, I guess we'll call the school board meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here. We will have the reading of the mission statement and the rules of the meeting by Ronnie.
The mission of the School District of St. Croix Falls is to provide a supportive, student-centered learning environment that cultivates character, fosters academic excellence, and embraces diversity. The rules are to focus on the mission and vision statements of the district, come prepared, be respectful of others and open and accepting of ideas, actively participate, avoid side conversations, and remember that our board meetings are an open forum.
Thank you, Ronnie. It doesn't look like we have any public comments, no presentations or awards, so we'll move down and look at the personnel and discuss and vote on the retirement of Paula Goodmanson, elementary teacher.
I'd make a motion to accept the retirement of Paula Goodmanson as an elementary teacher with thanks for her many years of service.
All right, we have a motion by Ronnie,
I'll second it.
second by Tashina. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we come into our upcoming events. We've got the March 25th committee/regular meeting at 5:15. We have the spring election. April 3rd, the joint PAC meeting, Board of Education meeting at 6 o'clock in CISA. We received that somewhere too, right?
Yep.
Or is it in the, oh, it's right here. There's an attachment there. And just to note, this guy that's coming, Joe, can't pronounce his last name, he was at the convention, and I think he was a speaker the last day.
He was.
And he was very good. Talk about how to build a culture of, you know, people wanting to be at Fall Creek and all that kind of stuff without having to spend a bunch of money on different things. He did a very good job, I thought. So I pretty certain I'll be going to that again. And that's one anybody can go to, right? It's not like it's limited to one board member or.
No, you can have as many board members as you would like to attend. Yep.
Well, yeah, I would recommend it if the board members are free that night. Yeah, we shouldn't have a meeting that night, so.
We'll get a district vehicle and leave here at, say, I don't know, 5:20, 5:30?
What would be the latest time to confirm? I don't see it
Said
on
on here, didn't it?
Yeah, March 24th is the
the- Oh,
deadline.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'll go to that one.
Can you put me down tentative? I'm just gonna check to make sure I could go.
She
'cause
only
I'd
has
like
a
to go.
pen. She can't pencil yet.
I'd be interested in going.
All right, then the next is the April 8th committee, and remember, the April 21st is a Monday meeting, following the election. All right, Ronnie, would you mind discussing the rules of the meeting?
For the whole one motion, I think we did a nice job. Well played.
Can I, before we move to that, since we're on upcoming events, so our next meeting, March 25, I will be very late, at least 45 minutes late. So I just wanted to make sure that there was at least 3 people. Everybody gonna be here next? I'm still gonna try and come, I have an appointment I can't miss.
I will put an exclamation point on there. I was debating if I was going to Madison that night or the next morning, so.
That's my only thing.
Bringing it up.
Yeah.
All right. All right, with that, I will take a motion to adjourn to executive closed session pursuant to section 19.851C, and that's it, of Wisconsin statutes.
I'll go ahead and make that motion to adjourn to executive closed session.
All right, we have a motion by Tashina,
I'll second.
second by Ronnie. Roll call vote.
Yes.
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 Yes. All right, we are in closed session. Thanks.
Thank you.